Hello and welcome back to Radio Free Urbanism, a podcast about urbanism and stuff. I am your host, Alex Williams. I'm delighted to be here, and we're already joined by patrons in the live chat here. We'll get to that in a second, but first, I want to say hello and welcome on our friends, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. Ethan Myers, you're first.
Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to be here and starting the new year off on Radio Free Urbanism.
Wow. Okay, yeah, we're excited to be here. It is a new year. Happy New Year.
We've got quite the show.
We do have quite the show. You have no idea how prepared we are for this episode today. And of course, joining us as well, my good friend and yours from Vancouver, Nick.
Hello and welcome back, guys. I know we haven't seen you since last year. Ha ha ha. But yeah, we got some things to talk about for sure. A few things. Yeah.
A few things. At least one thing.
Stuff.
Yeah, we got stuff. It's gonna maybe less urbanism, maybe more stuff. We'll see this. Will this turn into a movie review podcast? Are we going to talk about the shows that we're excited to see in 2025? You'll just have to wait and find out. But I want to welcome the good folks in the live chat here. We've got Jen and Skitch. Welcome to the live chat. Who else is in the live chat? It says we got 3 here. Chime in if you're in there. But if you want to join the live chat, you can join by going to patreon.com/radiofreeurbanism. And for as little as $1 a month, you can help keep the lights on here at Radio Free Urbanism. Jen said we were a couple minutes late starting, and Jen says, Skitch and I will take over if you don't start, and you don't want that to happen. Honestly, I think that'd be kind of rad. We should just let Skitch and Jen do a show one time.
I hand it over.
Yeah, just
That'd be excellent.
Over. Do we really, how integral to this idea are the 3 of us? Not very, right? We need 3 people who are willing to talk about urbanism. Sometimes 2 people who are willing to talk about urbanism and stuff.
We haven't done a solo. We haven't done a solo one yet. Maybe it'll happen one day.
Do you think it will? I don't know if we will.
You could do a monologue. Dude, you could talk for like an hour.
I could talk for an hour. Do you know, I was chatting with one of my coworkers the other day, and I was like sermonizing to him. I was like preaching. And I said, Max, thanks for always listening to my sermons. And he says, are you kidding? He's like, that's 50% of the reason I come to work. The other half's the paycheck. I'm like, what can I say? That's what I'm here for. Maybe I could someday. But alas, we want to hear from our friend Nick Laporte on what's going on. He's got an update for us.
That's me again. So last week I did mention about CES that I might be going. It's like 99% I'll be going to CES to cover micromobility at this wonderful conference, the Consumer Electronics Show, which I'm very excited to go to. Not just for the micromobility stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of other things I'd like to see. If I can get, one of those really fancy, crazy 8K VR headsets on my face at least once, I'll be very, very happy. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing all the bikes and scooters and really little weird devices to move people, because I think it's a really important thing. And to see it there in its presence at CES, I think says a lot about the future of mobility in the world. So yeah, look forward to that.
Speaking of the future of mobility, Nick, at CES, are you going to take the Vegas Loop?
I'm sure I will. It's been a while since I've been to Vegas, and the last time I went was probably like 2017. Holy smokes, that was a while ago. It's like 8 years ago. That's scary. Anyway, one thing I never did, obviously, was bike there. And Ethan, do you think I could bike down Las Vegas Boulevard, just like right down the middle? Would that maybe for the clicks?
You'll be taking your life into your own hands, but you know what, Nick? If you survive, you'll be getting the clicks there. I'll be saying that.
I think you should do what Austin has done and bike to the Hoover Dam and back.
Yeah. We'll see. The weather's good for it, I think, right? Isn't this like good season? Like 15 degrees
this is like
Celsius?
Perfect,
yeah.
Perfect cycling season down there.
And you know what? You're at CES. Maybe just see if you're allowed to get the full e-bike experience.
Yeah. Let me take it for a spin, like a real world spin.
Yeah, or sure. maybe you could have them follow you around and you could switch. You could say, I'm a very big, important, super cool, excellent influencer. And then you could have an entourage of people following you around, and then they switch out the bikes for you. They ride the other bikes, and then you're like, okay, I want to try that one now. Give me that one, and then you give them the other bike.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll see.
Yeah,
We'll see what we can do.
yeah.
I'll pull some strings.
Yeah, the only problem with that is Nick is like 7 feet tall, and so the bikes would have to be hugely adjustable, or maybe you could have like the people, one person on each side, pedaling on each side.
Kind of like Elf on the toilet.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like when I ride a bike. Yeah.
Yeah. Me having interacted with Nick so many times in human form in person, I know this to be a fact.
This
right?
is true.
Right, Ethan?
From the hundreds of times I've interacted with Nick in person, this is true. He is like 7'3". It's a real shame he hasn't gone into the NBA.
Yeah. You guys aren't going to believe this, but Nick and Ethan are roommates, and they're actually recording this podcast facing each other.
Yeah,
I won't make
true.
you turn your cameras around.
There's
I know
a
you guys
wall,
got
actually,
your
but
your
he's
whole
on the other
rig
side of
set
the wall.
up and stuff, but
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, it's very, very, very true. This is the end stuff portion of the podcast. Anyways,
Early.
Ethan.
Oh, wait, I got another
do you have
update.
more? Do you have
This is a story update, something we've talked about quite a few times. It's coming from New York City. So New York congestion pricing is happening. So coming this Sunday on January 5th, it's going to be implemented. So yeah, there was this last ditch effort. There was a lawsuit, and the courts were like, get the heck out of here. And they swatted it out of the way. So it's going to be implemented Sunday at midnight, and it's going to be $9, which is like basically the bottom of the barrel that they could possibly charge for this. But it's going to be there for peak times. That's between 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. on weekdays and 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekends. And off peak would be a 75% discount at $2.25. And this comes in two edition with, I think, the Holland Tunnel is going to have an increase with its tolls, along with some other bridges in the New Jersey kind of tri-state area. So that's a good thing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this actually affects New York City. And if this continues throughout the year, I hope they collect lots of data and they give it to us so we can see what actually happens with traffic in the city.
Yeah, that's gonna be,
definitely.
That's going to be super interesting. I mean, New York being a big city, it'll provide a lot of information.
And funding, hopefully, for the MTA.
Yeah, I mean
that's true too.
They're banking on a lot of funding from congestion pricing, so we'll honestly see if they raise prices or not on it too, because I mean, maybe they're just trialing the price now, and then, when things start getting a little bit harder for them financially, they might start cranking up that congestion pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it should be interesting to see. I always appreciate seeing how different cities try and make their systems work, right? Make their transportation systems work. So I'm interested to see what comes out of this. Ethan, you got a story for us.
Yes, that is true. Let's open up the stories and get to the urbanism side and away from the stuff. So, 2024 was not the most massive year for new transportation systems in the US or Canada. However, we do have a brand new extension opening to a great transportation system. It's in the capital of one of the North American cities. It's been 4 years in the works, and it's coming to the city of Ottawa. That's right. The first transit extension of year is going to be for lines 2 and 4 on OC Transpo in Ottawa, meaning that the capital of Canada is going to be getting some new public transportation. Now, the Southern Line was already in existence for OC Transpo, Line 2. However, it's going to be getting an extension and a spur-off line called Line 4, which is going to connect to the airport. This is a north-south running line and mainly runs to the south of the city. Now, personally, I'm not super informed on, the Ottawa metro area, but it seems like this line is going to at least provide some frequent service for the people of the region. That's always a good thing, Starting out, though, its opening date is going to be January 6th, so finally a big event that happened on that date in history. And it's gonna be interesting how they're opening it too, because when it first opens, it's only going to be running on weekdays. But they're saying allegedly 2 weeks from the opening date that it's going to start running on Saturdays as well, and then 2 weeks after that it's supposed to be running on Sundays. So they're kind of rolling it out slowly, working through all the issues to kind of get it rolled out over a term rather than having the service full up and max running to go. Now, during these off-period times, they are going to have bus substitutes pretty much the entire time that this train service is existing. So that way, you don't have to rely on, if the service is not running on Saturday or Sunday, you can actually still ride the service. But, Ottawa, really not a city that you think about too much for public transportation. Kind of always seen as a underserved city in terms of rail transit. But this line, this line and Spur do seem like they're going to provide some much needed public transportation in Ottawa. I know frequencies aren't too great on the system. I believe it's every 12 minutes during peak, and then off peak I think it's a little bit worse than that. But the idea is, connecting these communities, and we love that here in this community.
It's true. It's true. We like to be connected. So I think I'm the only one here who has been to Ottawa, which is kind of interesting. I spent like 3 days there in October, and I think I gave a little bit of a report when I came back. I wasn't overly impressed by it. In general, especially like the transit had some cool features. Like I enjoyed they have double-decker buses. That was kind of fun to ride. But I just I was a little bit disappointed because broadly speaking, Canada has better public transportation than the United States. If you just kind of, go by city size, transit opportunities.
But now with the capitals.
But yeah, not with the capitals. And this is something that really kind of, it ate at me a little bit in Ottawa, because I was thinking people are coming here, and people from all over the world are coming here. And
are they?
Well, I mean, I don't know, maybe not. But this is the capital city, right? If an ambassador to Canada, they go to Ottawa, and is this what are we showing them our best? This is what they're seeing and experiencing if they happen to take transit. Meanwhile, Washington D.C. wipes the floor with Ottawa as far as public transportation goes. And I've never been to Washington D.C., but even if you just look at a picture of their stations side by side, you're kind of like, okay, well, the U.S. might have won this round at least.
I mean, at the end of the day, D.C. is a significantly larger city too.
It's true.
So you're dealing with that, and it being a much larger metro area than Ottawa. But Ottawa's still putting in the work to expand the system. It's definitely not perfect. These actual 2 new lines aren't even electrified. They're going to be, I believe, running diesel multiple units on them. So you're going to be dealing with diesel-powered trains, and not the best for these short, operations. But maybe one day they can electrify. But this kind of breaks a little drought in transit building, because Canada, throughout the entire year of 2024, did not add on any new rail transit lines.
No, it's true.
For the entire year of 2024.
Yeah.
And this is the newest one, so congratulations to Ottawa for breaking the streak. That's always a good thing, and hopefully Toronto follows up with some new transit lines, in Calgary too.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope. We have a lot of work to do, and of course we've talked about the problems that Canada and the U.S. has, as well as far as getting bogged down with consultancy and planning, and worrying about this and worrying about that, and extra reviews again and again and again, and then worries about how are we going to fund this thing, and then operational funding as well, right? We've got 2 orders of government who typically prefer just doing the ribbon cutting funding, and the actual funding of the transit service is often left to the cities, despite the city having fewer levers to pull on to fund this sorts of thing. And that creates a lot of frustration, because we have provincial and federal government who they like to show up and cut the ribbon at the pretty new station, but they might not be as interested in just taking care of the stuff that we already have, right? And so yeah, we have a lot to work on when it comes to transit. What do you think, Nick?
Oh, in Ottawa in general, again, I haven't been there yet, But it's one of those places when I do hear about it, it seems like they're making strides, but it's nowhere near where it should be. And I know they've had a lot of problems with their train network where basically people wanted to rely on it, but it just like was broken for a while, wasn't it? Like a bunch of issues. But it is good to see them expand. And like you said, for it to be our capital city in Canada, it really doesn't feel like it in some ways, because it's quite a bit smaller than some of our other cities up there. But it's cool to see them making strides.
Yeah. And I don't mean to disparage anybody who's from Ottawa. I did enjoy many things on my visit while I was there. But I just wish that it was a little bit more of a showpiece. But maybe it's just a really great example of how we just can't seem to get it together here in Canada as far as building decent, like real good quality transit that's used by everybody, right? Like Washington D.C., everybody uses transit in D.C., right? But it's not as much the case in most of our cities here. But anyways, that's my...
DC is also kind of one of the exception cities
in
North America in general.
And that's the thing too, that it gives me hope that we're beating the US in other ways. So, I guess
definitely
you win some, you lose some.
Definitely in our local or in our national government, but
Well, it's all debatable. All right.
I wouldn't debate that, but
Well,
we'll talk about that stuff off the podcast.
Yeah. I have so many things to say. Nick, tell us your story. You got things to say.
This is something that came up on Reddit, and I thought it was an interesting talking point. And so somebody posted on the Fuck Cars subreddit, and it's titled, "Let's all just press every beg button we see, even if you don't need them." So, as you can imagine, this became quite a contentious topic for a little while. This was actually 9 days ago that this was posted. And I thought it was very interesting because it brought up, ideas in my head of, do I do that or anything like that? Should we do that? If we do that, will it make a difference with traffic? Are we just being dickheads by doing this? And what it says about our built environment. Why do we even have these things called beg buttons? Because that's one of the questions that was asked in this thread. Somebody said, can somebody explain to me what a beg button is? Because it is interesting to think about this button that you have to ask to cross the street when many places, for drivers, it's not the case. Even if that means they have some kind of sensor, magnetic sensor under the asphalt that they drive on that tells them that there's a car there so that it will change. So this is something that I actually do when I'm on a bicycle. And what I mean by that is that many of the bicycle routes in Vancouver, here's just an example, 10th Avenue is an east-west bike route, very popular. This was on a quiet Sunday that I rode, I think, last year in the winter. And there are these buttons on the pole as you get up to the curb and you press the button. Now, I always press the button. And the reason for me is like I get up to there and sometimes there's no cars that initially there and I could cross. But to me, I'm like, I'm going to press it just in case somebody like comes out of an alley and wants to speed or something so that it'll turn. They usually turn as soon as I press the button. But I'm not trying to be a dick about it. I'm not trying to hold people up. That's not the purpose. So back to this thread. What do you guys think? Like, is this something we should do as a form of protest to try to slow down traffic, to adjust the way that Google sees traffic? If we did this en masse, if hundreds of people in one city, thousands maybe even, did this every time they went by a button, whether or not they needed it, they pressed it, it would affect travel times, right? With cars, because one of the biggest things we know in city to affect that is intersections. So is that a good idea? Is this a good idea? What do you guys think about this?
Ethan, I want you to go first.
Really?
I promised I'd talk less on this episode, so.
He's got to let his thoughts marinate there.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, if we come down and think about it, what kind of actual impact is this going to have? I mean, you might have some sort of slowdown at intersections, but are you really going to see a noticeable difference at the end of the day when it comes to this? It seems like maybe the lowest form of guerrilla urbanism. And I still do it because it's just something that's so easy. I will literally just slap the button every single time. But, I mean, to me, it just doesn't seem like it's going to actually make any sort of difference. I just find it fun to slow down a driver's day by any means
Well,
necessary.
And might it even just backfire? It's like, oh, we're seeing the travel times through this place going down than what it used to be. Maybe we should widen the road, or some kind of shitty traffic decision gets made.
So, okay, so I want to read Jen's comment here. Jen says, it's kind of a fun, passive-aggressive way to let out steam, but ultimately I'm not sure if it would contribute to any problem solving. Yeah, and like, I think if you enjoy that, like, I guess it's, like, it doesn't do much. But I also, so I actually, I didn't call them bag buttons. I just called them like crossing buttons, or I don't know what I called them until literally just a few months ago when I started hearing people talk about bag buttons more, and then I realized what they were. But I'm not against bag buttons. Like, this is the thing. I don't think it's a bad thing that we need to let the system know when we approach the signal. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't have a problem with that. I wouldn't have a problem if I showed up to a traffic signal and it detected me if I was in a car or a bike or a pedestrian. Right? There's one intersection in Calgary where I've seen that it detects the bikes and it lights up. It says when bicycle is detected, and it lights up so that you know that you're going to get the light. And I think that's great. I think stuff like that works great. The frustrating part about bag buttons is when the cars are on a timer, and there's no cars around potentially, and then you have to wait for it to come, right? Like, if we did traffic management well, if we did movement management well and mobility management well, you would have bag buttons, but all it would be is just like a notification to the system that, hey, I'm here and I'm looking to go this way, right? It's the same way that, like, the Dutch have sensors that actually work. Like, we have sensors in so many of our intersections, but they don't work as efficiently as the Dutch ones do. And so if you're driving, you're still going to end up waiting at a light for 30 seconds while other traffic is non-existent, but the light's on a timer, right? Like, we sensed you and there's nobody here, and we know that, the system knows that, but we have to wait, right? And so I don't really understand the hate of bag buttons. I just think that we need to do bag buttons and sensors better across the
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we need to eliminate them in places where we don't need them. It seems like they get overused.
Yeah.
I think traffic intersections in general, stop signs get overused, where we could much more easily put something like a yield sign, even roundabout, stuff like that, where we can manage getting around. Most people can do that, right? If we build the infrastructure to facilitate that.
I think that the biggest frustration that a lot of people have with bag buttons is they kind of see them as this indicator species of a really bad pedestrian environment. And for good reason. I mean, most of the time you run into a bag button, you're going to be at a road or an intersection that typically just doesn't see the level of pedestrian traffic that a signalized intersection that accommodates pedestrians in a city has. Mm-hmm. And so when you run into these things, it's really just an indicator of bad road design, and that's why people don't like the beg button. So I can see why there is animosity towards the beg button. It's just that it may not be the greatest idea to, always press the button at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think worst case scenario, you're just going to get more cars idling and waiting. Best case scenario, I suppose, I don't think this would actually happen, is that you affect traffic times enough that certain people on the edge start to change their behaviors because they're sick of waiting. Is that just how traffic works in general, right? It's like the whole one more lane thing. You make it easier to drive, more people will drive, right? You make it harder to drive, less people will drive.
Yeah, unless it's also still more difficult to walk, right?
Yeah, true.
I want to highlight something Skitch said here. Skitch says, most urban intersections should have a default pedestrian signal. The beg button could be used to extend the crossing time for those who need extra time. Now, I think this is an interesting idea, and this is something downtown Calgary, most of our intersections, you don't have to press the button to cross as a pedestrian. There is a button there sometimes, but it'll be for the audible signal, So you'll press the button so that it beeps at you, right? So if you have any visual impairments, or if you just want that audible cue, like if you're just standing at the corner and you're looking at your phone, right? That audible cue can help you be like, okay, it's my turn to go, right? So I think stuff like that is fantastic. I know in Ottawa, if you press the bag button and hold it, you have to hold it for like 5 seconds, and then it will do the audible cue. So yeah, it's kind of I don't know. Like I'm not against them. In some areas, they make more sense than others. Obviously, in high pedestrian traffic areas, you shouldn't really need a bag button. You should just expect that there are going to be people there to cross. But yeah,
When you
I
have
like
a
that.
high pedestrian traffic area and you have to press the button, even though the light will change every 30 seconds or so, there's
Yeah.
like no signal to cross unless you press the
Right.
button. That's a bit silly, and that
Yeah,
does
yeah,
happen on
yeah.
occasion. But
Yeah,
this
I
is
do
minor stuff.
think, especially if there being a pedestrian crossing does not change the sequence of the traffic lights, right? Like the red, yellow, green. If the pedestrian crossing doesn't change that, then it should just change it, right? Just like make it an automatic. Okay,
Yeah,
pedestrians cross at this time. Just change that light along with it. Which
yeah.
Skitch also says we need leading pedestrian intervals. Yes, please. I was riding in the front of a friend's cargo bike the other night, and it's a good thing he was paying attention because we almost got right hooked by somebody coming around the corner because the cycling had a green going straight and right at the same time that the drivers had a green going straight and right. And of course, the wheeling lane is on the right side of that turn lane. And so if somebody's turning their car and the cyclist isn't seen, right? Because you remember, like, that's a smaller profile, and often in a blind spot. And so having leading pedestrian and wheeling intervals is a big deal. That makes a big safety difference. Yeah. So yeah.
And allow cyclists to go proceed on them as well.
Yeah. Like you can have, like just honestly, it comes down to decent design, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it comes down to safe and thoughtful design. Which actually, while we're on this subject, I want to share my screen here. Dum-dum-dum.
There is something
Here.
I like to do. Okay. Oh,
Yeah, oh.
what is this?
Oh,
Yeah, so these are traffic incidents involving pedestrians. This is from the City of
Oh, my.
Calgary's data. And as you can see, we're going up over time. In October 2024, we had 49 incidents involving pedestrians. Now, I don't have the breakdown of like the results of this data necessarily, right? Like if it resulted in a death or injury or gone to the hospital. But these are the reported ones, right? These aren't counting near misses. These aren't counting, uncomfortable situations, anything like this. This is like reported data, and it's like more than one a day for the year of 2024, and it's getting worse. And I don't know exactly what is the reason for that. It certainly doesn't help that lots of our newer suburbs have crazy wide roads, like huge wide roads, and that doesn't help. There was an incident in Southwest Calgary not too long ago where a kid wound up with life-altering injuries, and so I just want to bring that up as like we know there are solutions to these things, right? We know that there is a way to fix these things. And Ben Min says already few on the first day of 2025. Yeah, there's one already listed here. So
Wow, that's fast.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like this is like a regular thing, right? Like this is just
That's
so
a
and we can't act like oh, well, this is just part of life. Well, like we know solutions to this. And one of those
Yeah.
solutions is exactly what Skitch said. And that's leading intervals for pedestrians and wheelers, right?
I would like to see the more like year over year and how that's changing, especially when we're seeing in the United States, especially that traffic deaths and injuries are going down, but injury and cyclist incidences are going up dramatically, which is just wild, right? We're shifting the risk. And Jen said in the chat, the word incidence is so hard to hear. It sounds so close to accident. Yeah, I can hear that, but incident just means that something happened.
Something
It's
happened.
just very neutral,
Yep.
I feel.
Yeah, but the word itself is
does.
it looks close to accident,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, and maybe that's something we should bring up. Like if there's any new listeners, any people who are kind of getting into this sort of thing for the first time, the reason that we talk about not using the word accident is because there are solutions to this, right? Like things like this don't just happen, right? The city, somebody was hit and killed crossing the street not too far from my house, and of course the city comes by like immediately afterwards and puts down those red concrete barriers that extend the curb a little bit. They reduce the crossing distance. They slow people who are driving down a little bit, so that you pay attention. Especially, there's a lot of schools in this area, right? I live in an area with probably the most schools per capita in the city, and so there's a lot of vulnerable road users, whether they're biking or walking to and from school, to and from friend's house, whatever, and we're reactionary. We're like, oh my goodness, something happened here. Maybe we should do something about it. But the thing is, we know what a dangerous intersection looks like. Every single member of the community can look around our neighborhood and point to people are driving too fast here. There's not a safe crossing here. It's not comfortable here. My kids cross to school here, but I won't let them do it alone because of this or that, right? And we need to be more proactive about actually making these things safer instead of waiting for something to happen and then saying, oh yeah, I guess we better get on that, right? Like, why are we not prioritizing this, right? When people's lives are on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when it's happening over and over. And this is something we talk about over and over because it's just so tiring to have to talk about it. When we know what the answer is, people are advocating for improving the community, improving the streets, and still nothing gets done. At what point can we actually say, hey, you need to be responsible for this?
Yeah. And I will say too, a lot of the time on a lot of these things, the solutions are broadly supported. There's nobody fighting against this sort of thing. There's no like anti leading pedestrian intervals. There's no AstroTurf group who's fighting against this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we don't do it, and the reason that we don't do it is because there are it's just people are, I guess, lethargic about it, right? Like, we're just kind of waiting around. Like, well, that's the way it is. It is what it is. You can't live without a little risk. And,
I will say
that,
there are quite a few different groups out there that do quite a bit of astroturfing, especially in wealthier communities and suburban communities, in terms of leading pedestrian intervals and actually making streets safer.
Yeah, and I've been fortunate enough not to see that sort of opposition in my area. Talking to people who I know oppose other things that I like. I think these sorts of things are a little bit more broadly popular, but they don't seem to come up as much, just because it's become so, unfortunately, something that we just seem to accept as, well, part of life, right? It is what it is, and I don't think that that's the approach that we should be taking to life, to the way our communities are built and the way that people get around our communities. We need to be proactive about this sorts of thing.
And it's good to see just the public zeitgeist change on the subject. So I came across a video recently, popped up in the Vancouver subreddit, and it was from 1980 about traffic diversion in Shaughnessy, which is traditionally been one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Vancouver. It still is in the whole country. And it was fascinating to see because in there, they were trying to build these traffic diversions, right? And I think the purpose then was basically to keep out through traffic from people driving through the neighborhood. The safety wasn't the biggest thing to talk about, right? But nowadays, it seems like that's changing, where most people understand the difference between, or at least the importance of traffic diversions, not just for, making your streets quieter, but also for making it a safer place for people who live there or for people who are passing through, especially vulnerable road users. But this was reposted on Uncouver on YouTube. Snob Protection in Shaughnessy, 1980 traffic diversions in Vancouver's most exclusive district. It was interesting just because I think mostly the whole argument was like, these rich people, they shouldn't be doing this. This isn't fair. Basically just for traffic's sake. There wasn't much talk about traffic safety or making the streets safer. But yeah, it's worth a watch if you're interested in Vancouver.
Yeah. We'll have that in the show notes. I'm kind of curious to check that out after the show. But yeah, that's the reason why we don't tend to use the word accident, because we know how these things can be prevented. And there are some ways that we're making improvements, but I think broadly we fall quite short on that. Especially, I mean, it's been decades of falling short, and when you have decades of falling short, it takes a lot to catch up. But alas, did we have anything else we wanted to talk about?
A story? Yeah, we got one here. Briefly, we can talk about. Yeah, it's a tragic story. Do we want to talk about the tragic story? There's been a lot of tragic stories over the past week.
Let's bring it up. I think we have some thoughts on it.
Sure. Okay, so this is coming out of South Korea. If you haven't heard, I actually didn't hear about it until a day or two after this happened. So South Korea, an airplane, there was a crash. So what happened was the plane was taking off, I think, and there was a bird strike. They had an emergency landing. The landing gear didn't properly deploy. They skidded along the runway, and when they hit the end of the runway, they hit an embankment, and it was a disaster, to say the least. I'm not going to show any videos here, but there are some screenshots of the plane, and 179 people died, tragically. 2 people on board survived, which is shocking if you've seen the video. Very sad, very tragic, very unfortunate. But the reason why we bring this up is the reason why we often bring stories like this up, not because we want to highlight it as something that we need to worry about too much. Obviously, this is a problem. We don't want this happening, but how infrequent these happen and how much it gets blown up in the media, because obviously these things end up being front page news across the world when they do happen. It's absolutely tragic that 179 people died on this airplane. But the thing is, we need to remind ourselves how much we're not talking about the destruction on our roads again and again when it comes to traffic violence. In Korea alone, in 2020, over 4,000 people died on the roads. In the world, something like 1.2 million. Every day, twice as many people are dying on our streets than died in that aircraft. And while all of them should be prevented as best as we can, I think we need to keep shifting in the public zeitgeist what we're focusing on and how we need to make our world safer so we don't have these tragic incidences. Right? I'm still trying to change my vernacular.
Oh, and it's hard.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think about this?
Yeah, I mean the main reason that I thought we should bring this up is the way that the airline industry deals with this sorts of thing, right? They do a very, very in-depth analysis of what went wrong with the technology, both on the ground and in the air, what went wrong with the infrastructure, right? In this case, the plane hit an embankment. What went wrong with human error, right? Both on the ground and in the air. What were any security issues? What were anything? They get into it all, and they pull it apart, and they afterwards say, okay, what are we going to do different now? And they implement those changes, right? We see it again and again and again. Every single time there is an air travel related industry incident, we get into the nitty gritty, and and people see the report, right? Like, people find out, like, this is what happened. This is right? That's how you have shows like Mayday and stuff, right? Like where these things are discussed, um, and we don't see the same sort of analysis like we were just talking about with traffic safety. We don't see that same sort of analysis. We don't see that same sort of response. We see very reactionary response, right? Like if we dealt with this airline incident in Korea the same way that we deal with traffic incidents in Calgary, all we would do was we'd say, well, the embankment, dig up the embankment, and that's it. And then it would say, I don't know what else you want us to do. Well, do an investigation, like find out what's going on, right? Actually dig into the details. Do like have some critical thinking about this, and then let's figure out what went wrong and figure out how it went wrong, right? Like don't just identify the problem, but identify how that problem happened in the first place, right? Every single like Jen brought up in the comments here. This is something I hadn't heard of, but in New Orleans, a driver intentionally rammed into a crowd on Bourbon Street and killed at least 15 people. And this is like live updates happening now. And like it in this sorts of situation, are we going to stop just at the, what happened, right? Oh, he turned down this street and he started driving this speed and he did this, or here are his intentions, blah, blah, blah. Or are we going to talk about like the actual how this happened, right? And this is where the sort of traffic calming, bollards, right? Like having actual protected pedestrian infrastructure. If there's a place where like this is where people are, this is where people live, where they operate, where they go about their life. This is an area where something like this is a hazard. Well, make it not a hazard, right? Like fix the problem, right? We need to actually get deeper into these issues. So,
Well,
lessons to be learned.
Those are looked at not as in depth, but often the focus is on how can we keep the person inside the car safer, right? That's why we have the guardrails on highways that have changed, where they used to be, if you hit it, it'd be going right through your windshield, maybe cutting your head off. Now they break away and slow down the car, much like a crumple zone on the car itself, which is one of the things that's led to improvements with safety inside of cars. But yeah, we're forgetting the people outside the car. And that classic example of the street lights, the street post, where it has the sheared bolts on the ground, where if a car hits it, it breaks off so that the person in the car isn't injured, while it completely forgets that there's a beg button on that pole and there might be a person standing pressing that button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we are our approach to traffic safety is protecting private property at the expense of people's lives. And you know what, like everybody can make their decisions about what they value, but personally I'm on the side of human life. So that's where my interest lies, and I think we need to do a lot more than we are. Ethan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it really all comes down to our approach to how we deal with these sorts of tragedies, and rather than just mourning what happened, which we should do, it's we should learn from what happened there, and an actual address to the problem, rather than just kind of saying, oh well, it's gonna happen. The dismissive attitude is really not going to get anybody anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teach your kids to look before they cross the street. Like, that's not going to help you when you're standing on the sidewalk and a car jumps the curb and crushes you.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
There's shared responsibility, but there's also, like, come on.
Were you wearing high vis though, Nick?
Yeah, I wasn't. Sorry. It's my
fault.
fault.
You weren't? Oh yeah, it's clearly your fault.
Yeah. Yeah. Like high vis will not save your life, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that we're having this discussion again.
Let me put it in context. I said the wrong numbers, but 179 people died in that airplane tragically. On average, every single day in the world, 3,200 people die from traffic collisions and crashes.
Yeah.
Dude, that's 15 to 20 times more per day, every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane.
And you can do the kilometers traveled You can do like all the conversions, all the do it by country, do it like however you like. Um, air travel is safer because we take it seriously, because we take safety seriously in the airline industry.
Okay, what about trains? How safe are they compared to airlines? They're pretty safe, right?
They're not as safe
not
as
as safe.
flying. Flying in an airplane, in a commercial aircraft, is the safest way to travel. But I believe trains are second on that list.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see the breakdown. I'd also be curious to see what the like rail transport industry, what their like crash reports and things like that, like what do they do when they deal with these situations. I also think that things like level crossings are also a huge ongoing issue, especially we've seen it with Brightline down in Florida. We need to actually, like the way that we build our rail infrastructure, I think there are a lot of ways that we can be smarter about it as well. Which that does, because the airplane has an interaction on the ground, and then it's up in the air where there's lots more space, and it's not necessarily crossing paths with pedestrians, vehicles, cyclists, trucks, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be interesting to do a dive into that. All right, some listener mail. What do we think?
Oh yeah, we got one in here.
Yeah, let's do it.
Ethan, do you want to read this question?
Yes, this one comes from one of our great patrons, Jen Hall, and she says, "What are some of your personal goals for 2025?" Nick, I think this would be a good one to start out for you.
We talked a little bit about it last week, but yeah, I've got one today. It's something I'm working on, which is just being healthier with eating. I tend to eat a lot. I love to eat. I also love to exercise. So those two go in hand. And the fact that I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I'm a strong person. I'm a very fit person, strong, but I'm a lot heavier than I used to be. I weighed myself today. The last time I weighed myself and put it in my app or whatever was back in April, and I was 194 pounds. Today, 216. I was like, holy shit, gained 20 pounds in the past, 8 months. So I'm going to be working on getting rid of some of that, getting a bit leaner and healthier.
Nice.
That's one of mine, I guess.
Nice. What about you, Ethan?
Well, I got 3 things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to talk less, I'm trying to listen more, and I'm trying to ride my bike more.
Well,
It's a good thing you moved to Portland.
It is. It is
Yeah.
a very good thing. I need to start breaking out the bike more. I haven't done it a whole lot since I've been here, but it's something that I really want to do more, get more of that active transportation. And also, listen to people more as well, too. I feel like that's always something that, I haven't, done as well in my life. And I feel like, listening to people more, you learn a lot more from listening than you do from, speaking yourself. So
yeah.
speak less, listen more.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I'm trying to talk less on this show. That's one of my
Never
my
going to happen.
New Year's resolutions.
Nope.
Yeah, we'll see.
You will always be number one in speaking.
Yeah. I have a lot to say. What can I say? Yeah, I like those. I like those goals that you guys have. For me, as far as personal goals go, I don't know. I'm trying to eat healthier as well. I'm not sure. Jen suggests I keep it to a simple 5% reduction in talking. I'll work on that. Maybe we'll do some measurements of the last several episodes and see where I'm at. Yeah, I want to eat better, but this year I think also big goal is to win the election. That's a big thing that I'm working on. And
Here he comes, Pierre Polyev. Watch out.
Well, see, everybody always says that I should get into federal politics.
Don't
Maybe
do it.
someday you'll be in federal
No.
politics. I'm a municipal politics.
You're
guy.
not a sociopath, so you can't.
No,
it won't
no.
work
This
for
is
you.
this is where things happen, right? Like I live in this city. I want to work in this city. I want to make this city the best place that it can be, and I want to do that with people in my community, right? Yeah, so that's kind of my big goal. But also, like, as far as having like a process-oriented goal, I want to make more videos. I want to learn more. I want to read more. I've already started off the year. I just finished Street Fight, which was recommended to us by Miser, who was on the show the other week. and I've been reading the high cost of free parking, which has been really like not just eye opening. Like I already was aware of a lot of the things that he discusses in there, but it was also great to hear about some of the solutions, like the way to work with market forces and make our cities better places, based on transportation. Jen asks, "What's one of my favorite solutions?" I'm gonna have to get back to you on that. They all had names that I'm like trying to remember, and yeah, I'm gonna have to. I'm listening to the audiobook and then I'm going to get the physical copy and like highlight specific things so that I can recall it. Um, yeah, I don't know, favorite solutions that he offered. I mean, the easiest solution, the simplest solution is to get rid of parking minimums, right? Parking minimums can be really destructive to
Costly
small
parking
businesses.
mandates.
Yeah, costly parking
Yep.
mandates. So, dump them, dump them. They're not worth it. Let the market decide.
Yeah, city after city is doing it, which is great to see. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
I mean,
yeah. Go ahead, Ethan.
it's been expanding. I mean, a Parking Reform Network actually just came out with a little like sheet of like, here's all the cities in 2024 that got rid of their parking minimums.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's one of those topics that's really frustrating to talk about when you've read books. Like I've read High Cost of Free Parking, I've read Parking Paradise twice. What a fantastic book by Henry Grabar. But when you talk to somebody who doesn't know the ins and outs of it, like I'm not saying I'm an expert or anything, but like I've read whole books on it at least, and they like it's like trying to teach somebody like a baby about the fucking universe sometimes. Like it's so deep. It seems like it's so simple. Like you'd be like, hey, maybe we should have less parking here. And then people will be like, well, if they didn't have parking, they have parking because they want to bring in the customers, right? They would not have parking if they thought it wouldn't bring them in money. I'm like, you can't not have parking. There's businesses who have tried to open, but they can't financially do it because they can't afford the parking. Like
Yeah.
they don't even know that step.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's like a really interesting conversation to have with people, about like the way that it affects small businesses, right? Like there are often times where if somebody wants to open a business but they can't afford to pay for the parking or to build the parking if they own the lot outright. But yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and it goes super deep, and you also learn about like the cost that it has on housing, like the way that it affects housing.
Something
If
like 20 to 30% in some cases.
yeah,
Increased
like
costs.
it can
Yeah.
increase the cost of an apartment over $100,000, right? Like we're in a housing crisis, and we need to be talking about housing humans, not housing cars, right?
And not only that, it takes away amenities that buildings can have too. Like
Yeah.
those Texas donuts, the where they have the parking garage in the center and then all the apartments surrounding it. You
Oh,
remove
yeah.
the ability to have like a courtyard, for example, in your building.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It's wild to see how certain countries do it. I think one of the ones that I found most interesting was in Thailand, like in Bangkok. So many places, like so many high rises, like the first, 20 to 30% of the building was just, a car park.
yeah,
It's
Wild.
just a parking pedestal.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So different. Here in Vancouver, what do we have? We've got those pedestals where it's like townhouses and then, the big tower
Yeah,
of apartments.
yeah. And Jen says that her building has more amenities because it went with much less parking, right? Like it
Nice.
also depends where you live, right? Like
Yeah.
different people need different things. And this is something I'm always harping on about. Like do not build a city for yourself. If you drive a car to do your errands, that's fine. But not everybody does. Not everybody wants to. Not everybody has to. And we shouldn't pay for things like that is expensive, right? Like this is our location, our allocation of resources is money, right? And like it adds up. It really, really adds up.
Yeah.
And yeah, Jen also says that she gets to save money on something she didn't need, right? Like different people have different lifestyles, and that's okay. Yeah, we shouldn't mandate that everybody must pay for this thing, right?
Yeah.
Something that that he mentions in the book, he describes it as public transportation, but you have to bring your own car, right? Like the roads, all of that stuff that's included in your taxes, you pay for that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's included in your taxes, but you got to bring your own car. And if you don't, you can't go anywhere and you can't use the public transport.
Yeah. It's wild to see how different it is. I'm a big fan of Chris Broad in Japan on YouTube. He lives in Japan. He's an English fella. And recently he made a video. It was like 10 weird things about Japan that, it's hard to get used to. And one of them he talks about was getting a car and dealing with parking and saying, like, he said he didn't like it how, if you got a car in certain places, the police would have to come check your house to make sure that you had a parking spot before you could actually like get that car registered, to make sure you had space to store your own vehicle. And he thought that was weird and negative, and I can assume it's an inconvenience for sure if you want to have a car. But I'm like, that's one of the reasons why it's such a dense country where people can walk, they can bike relatively safely, and the transit is so incredibly dense and wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think, like, I mean, obviously we don't need the police coming in and inspecting our homes here. Like they don't, when you buy a couch at IKEA, they're not checking your place that you've got enough room in your house to keep your couch. But I think like that realization that this is private property, right? Like I can't store my couch on the street, right? And we're paying for people to be able to store their private property on public property. And so I think the conversation had and the data shown in the high cost of free parking is a really, really great look at potential solutions, but also like how deep this problem goes and the way that it affects business, the way that it affects our homes, the cost of housing, all of these things, the way that it affects our mental health. We were talking about bowling alone and the kind of this disintegration a little bit of like the social clubs. Like I'm in a choir, but we've seen tons of choirs. This choir is almost 50 years old, I think, and they've seen other choirs just come and go because it's hard to keep these things together, especially when it is often so difficult to get places, right? Like what happened to the local community center, the local community pool, the local grocery store, convenience store, restaurant, or cafe that everybody meets up at, right? It's harmed us socially, right? Like as people, it's harmed our communities, and I think we need to take a serious look at how we can make improvements.
Yeah. I love it.
Definitely.
I do have a positive story if you guys want to hear it really quickly.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Coming out of Vancouver, there's a development that's under construction. It's really going up very fast near Kitsilano Beach. So I'm just showing a map here. This is Vancouver. And just here, this is Kitts Beach, one of the most popular beaches in Vancouver, south of downtown. And right here, this area here is actually land that is owned by I can't pronounce it. I'm very sorry. I believe it's Senaqua. It's a First Nations tribe. So this space here is all being developed by the beach, and they're putting up space enough for 6,000 residents. And something that they decided to do was talk about parking. So there's going to be 850 parking spaces, car parking spaces among these buildings for 6,000 residents, and there's going to be almost 5,000 spots for bicycles. That was a decision they made.
6,000 units or 6,000 residents?
6,000 residents. Yeah. So yeah, lots of bikes, which is pretty cool.
Lots of housing.
Lots of housing too. So that's just one of them, right? I know there's another one that I'm even more excited for, which is over here in the Jericho lands. This is basically, there's a school here, and this is owned or used to be owned by the government for a military base, basically where people would live. That's going to be a huge development. Future Skies train station there too. It's going to be massive. But anyway, that's one of the good stories for sure. They figured parking out. They made a decision, and I like that. Did we lose Alex? Is he gone? He's frozen.
I think so.
Mr.
Oh yeah,
Freeze
he's
came in.
frozen.
Yeah. Well,
oh my goodness! Now we're down to 2 people.
maybe we'll be down to 1 for real. It's gonna happen. I'm just gonna
Mid-show, you know.
I'm gonna take off to just be like, you know what? I'm gone. It's negative 15 in Calgary. Maybe that's why.
Yeah,
All right,
Alex
well,
just froze.
he didn't want to say goodbye, and that's okay. But
Apparently not.
We're coming to time. So at this point in the show, I think it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate you guys listening to the show, the patrons in the live chat. Thanks for joining us. And with that, I think, Ethan, you can take us away.
Yeah, I think I can take us away. But, if you want to become one of these lovely patrons for just $1 a month.
That's it.
Start off the new year, $1 a month. You get access to the live show. You can be one of our wonderful live viewers. And if you can't make the live show, guess what? The show is pretty much up as soon as we're done recording. So you get early access to the show as well as access to our Discord, where you can talk to us, send us videos, anything like that, story ideas, mail, everything like that. You can talk to us in the Discord over there, and just for $1 a month. But regardless, I know Alex took off, which means we'll be one catchphrase short for the end of this episode. But folks, thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, train good. Oh wait, hold on. I forgot. Nick, where can the good people find you?
Yeah, my name is Nick Laporte. You can find me at Nick the Door on YouTube, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Did you do your thing?
I did not do my thing.
Okay, you do your thing.
Alex,
Where can they find you?
The good people can find me over on Climate and Transit on all social medias that are out there. I think the good people can find Alex at Humane Cities on pretty much every platform. But thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And as always, train good, car bad.
Two wheels good.
And feet first.
How do I stop it?